Our plane went down over Montana wilderness. 4 passengers survived. The pilot didn't. They found his body 3 miles from the crash site. Parachute unopened. Body mangled. We held a funeral. Insurance paid out. 6 months later, when I had an aviation expert examine the black box, what he told me was impossible. The cockpit door had opened 30 seconds before impact. Someone had gone out, and that person was Ryan Caldwell. But Ryan was dead. We buried him, or so we thought, because when the DNA test came back, the body in that coffin belonged to someone else, and Ryan's bank account had received $5 million from Mexico. My name is Julian Cross. I'm 42 years old, and I just learned that our pilot had tried to kill us. Let me take you back 14 months. I was CEO of a software company in Seattle, Technova Solutions. We just secured a major contract with the Department of Defense, $75 million over 3 years. It required frequent travel to our facility in Bozeman, Montana. Commercial flights were inefficient. Too many connections, delayed schedules, so we leased a private jet, a Cessna Citation, 8 seats, perfect for our needs. The leasing company recommended a pilot, Ryan Caldwell, 45 years old, former Air Force, 20 years of commercial flying experience, impeccable safety record, professional demeanor. We interviewed him twice, checked his credentials thoroughly. Everything was legitimate. FAA license current. No violations, no incidents. References praised his skill and reliability. We hired him on a 6-month contract with option to extend. Ryan started in March. For the first 4 months, everything was perfect. Smooth flights, always on time, professional communication. He knew the routes, understood our schedule, made the travel seamless. My team loved the convenience. No more airport security lines, no more delays. We could leave Seattle at 7 a.m. and be in Montana by 9. Work all day, fly back that evening. It transformed our efficiency. Ryan seemed to enjoy the work. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly, but friendly enough. Would chat about flying occasionally, told stories about his Air Force days. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing raised any flags. In July, we had a particularly important trip scheduled. Meeting with Defense Department officials. Final contract signatures. Critical milestone for the company. 4 of us were going. Me, Sarah Chen, our CFO, Tom Bradford, our chief engineer, and Lisa Morrison from legal. We boarded the Citation at 6 a.m. on July 18th. Clear skies, perfect flying weather. Ryan did his pre-flight checks, everything normal. We took off at 6:20, estimated flight time 90 minutes. We'd be in Bozeman by 8. Plenty of time for our 9 o'clock meeting. The first hour was smooth. We were working on laptops, reviewing presentation materials, going over contract details. Standard business flight. Then, at 7:15, everything changed. The plane started shaking, not turbulence. Something mechanical, a grinding sound from the engines. Ryan's voice came over the intercom. Calm, but urgent. We're experiencing engine failure. I'm going to try to restart. Everyone buckle up. We looked at each other, concerned, but not panicking. Engine failures happen. Pilots are trained for this. We had backup systems. But then the grinding got louder. The shaking intensified, and Ryan's voice came back. This time different, tighter. Both engines are gone. We're going down. Brace for impact. That's when panic hit. Sarah started crying. Tom was frozen. Lisa grabbed the armrests so hard her knuckles went white. I looked out the window. We were over dense forest, mountains in the distance. No clearings visible, no roads, just endless trees. The plane was descending fast. The nose tilted forward. My stomach lurched. This was real. We were crashing. The last thing I remember before impact was the sound, like the world was being torn apart. Metal screaming, wind howling, and then nothing. I woke up hanging upside down, still strapped in my seat, blood in my mouth, pain everywhere. The plane had broken apart. The front section was gone, just jagged metal where the cockpit used to be. I could see sky through the torn fuselage, trees everywhere. We were in a steep ravine. The tail section had caught on rocks. That's probably what saved us. If we'd hit flat ground, we'd all be dead. I unbuckled, fell to what was now the ceiling, looked around. Sarah was unconscious but breathing. Tom was awake, holding his arm, clearly broken. Lisa was crawling toward the opening, bleeding from a head wound, but moving. "We have to get out," she said, her voice shaking, "in case there's fire." She was right. I could smell fuel. We helped Sarah wake up, got everyone mobile, climbed out through the torn metal, stood in the forest, 4 survivors, looking at what was left of our plane. And then Tom asked the question, "Where's Ryan?" We searched the immediate area. The cockpit section had separated. It was 50 yards away, wedged between 2 trees, completely destroyed. No way anyone in that section survived. We called out. No response. The forest was silent except for the wind. We tried our phones. No signal. Too remote. Too mountainous. We were on our own. We stayed near the wreckage, built a small fire with debris, waited, hoping someone had tracked our distress signal, hoping search and rescue was coming. By nightfall, no one had arrived. We spent that first night in shock. Minimal conversation, just survival mode, keeping warm, treating wounds with torn clothing, wondering if we'd be found. The next morning we heard helicopters. Search and rescue had located us. They landed in a clearing half a mile away, hiked in with medical supplies. We were evacuated, taken to a hospital in Missoula, treated for injuries, broken bones, lacerations, concussions, but alive, all 4 of us. The NTSB launched an immediate investigation, interviewed us separately, asked detailed questions about the flight, about Ryan, about the moments before the crash, about any unusual behavior. I told them everything. The engine failure, Ryan's announcements, the descent. They took notes, said they'd examine the wreckage, analyze the black box, determine cause. 3 days after the crash, a forest ranger found Ryan's body, 3 miles from the crash site, in a ravine. The body was badly damaged. Animals had gotten to it, but the flight suit was identifiable. The wedding ring matched Ryan's. The initial identification was made. Ryan Caldwell had died in the crash. His body had been thrown from the cockpit on impact. Not uncommon in crashes of this severity. His family was notified. His wife Amanda, 2 teenage kids. They held a funeral a week later. Closed casket given the condition of the body. I attended. So did Sarah, Tom, and Lisa. We stood in the back, watching Amanda and the kids grieve, feeling guilty somehow, like we should have died too. The NTSB preliminary report came out 6 weeks later. Dual engine failure, cause undetermined, still investigating, but no evidence of pilot error. Ryan had followed proper emergency procedures. He'd done everything right. Sometimes mechanical failures just happen. The insurance company paid out quickly. Ryan had a $5 million life insurance policy through the leasing company, standard for pilots. Amanda received the full amount. She moved to Colorado with the kids, started over. We tried to move on too, continued our work, found a new pilot, but I couldn't let it go. Something felt wrong. I'm an engineer by training. I think in systems and logic. Dual engine failure is extremely rare. Both engines failing simultaneously, almost impossible. Modern aircraft have redundancies, backup systems. Even if one engine fails, you can still fly on the other. Both going down at once? That shouldn't happen. So I started asking questions. Reached out to the NTSB investigator. Asked about the engines. What specifically had failed? He said they were still analyzing. Mechanical failures take time to understand fully, but preliminary findings showed catastrophic failure in both turbines. No clear cause yet? I wasn't satisfied. I contacted an aviation consultant, former NTSB investigator, guy named Michael Torres. Spent 30 years analyzing crashes. I hired him privately. Asked him to review the case. I want to know what really happened, I told him. Something doesn't add up. Michael reviewed all the available data. The NTSB reports, the wreckage photos, the flight recorder data. 2 weeks later, he called me. "Julianne, we need to meet. In person, what I found is serious." We met at a coffee shop in Seattle. Michael brought a laptop, pulled up the black box data. Flight recorder tracks everything: altitude, speed, engine performance, and cockpit door sensor. "Look at this," Michael said, pointing to a graph. "This line here shows cockpit door status. Closed the entire flight. Until here." He pointed to a spike in the data. The door opened and stayed open for 12 seconds, then closed again. When? I asked. Michael zoomed in on the timestamp. 30 seconds before engine failure. I stared at the screen. What does that mean? It means someone opened the cockpit door, left the cockpit, and closed the door behind them, 30 seconds before both engines failed. Could it be automatic? Some kind of malfunction? No. The door requires manual operation. Someone physically opened it. Ryan went back to check something? Maybe. But look at what happens next. Michael pulled up another graph. This is altitude. See this? Right after the door closes, the plane starts descending. Not a gentle descent, a controlled dive. Someone deliberately put the plane into a descent pattern. Why would Ryan do that? Michael looked at me seriously. That's the question. And here's another one. After the door closes the second time, there's no more cockpit activity. No radio transmissions, no course corrections, nothing. It's like the cockpit was empty. The implications hit me. You're saying Ryan left the cockpit, put the plane into a dive, and then what? Just let it crash? I'm saying the data suggests the cockpit was unoccupied after that door closed. How that's possible, I don't know. But the flight pattern is consistent with an unmanned aircraft. I sat back, processing. Could he have jumped? From a plane? With a parachute? Michael shrugged. Possible. But why? And if he did, where's the parachute? The body was found without one. What if it wasn't his body? The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. Michael stared at me. What are you suggesting? You said the body was badly damaged. Animals. Decomposition. What if someone made a mistake? What if that wasn't Ryan? They identified him. Wedding ring. Flight suit. But no DNA test, right? Just visual identification of remains? Michael was quiet. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke to someone for 10 minutes, hung up. I just talked to a contact at the coroner's office. No DNA test was performed. The identification was based on clothing and jewelry. Standard procedure when visual ID is clear. But what if it wasn't clear? What if someone wanted us to think it was Ryan? Michael leaned forward. Julian, if you're right about this, we're talking about something much bigger than a plane crash. We're talking about insurance fraud, staged death, multiple felonies. Can we get a DNA test done now? If we can get a court order. But we'd need probable cause, evidence of fraud. The black box data, the cockpit door, the unmanned descent, isn't that enough? It's suspicious, but not conclusive. We need more. I spent the next 2 weeks digging into Ryan's background. Everything I could find. Financial records, social media, employment history. Most of it was clean, normal. But I found some interesting things. Ryan had financial problems. His house in Oregon was in foreclosure. He had credit card debt exceeding $200,000. Medical bills for his daughter who had leukemia. Treatment costs insurance didn't cover. He was drowning. And then 6 months before he started working for us, he'd taken out that $5 million life insurance policy. Interesting timing. I also found something else. A property record in Mexico. Purchased 4 months ago. Cash sale. $500,000. Beach house in Baja. Owner listed as R. Caldwell. Could be coincidence. Caldwell isn't uncommon. But combined with everything else? I called Michael. Told him what I found. That's enough, he said. I'll contact the FBI. This is fraud. They'll want to investigate. The FBI took it seriously. Agent Maria Santos was assigned to the case. She reviewed all the evidence. The black box data, the financial records, the Mexico property. 2 days later, she called. We're opening an investigation, but I need you to keep this quiet. If Ryan Caldwell is alive, we don't want him knowing we're looking. You think he's alive? I think there's enough evidence to warrant exhumation and DNA testing. We're getting a court order now. 1 week later, they exhumed the body, took DNA samples, sent them to the FBI lab. Results came back in 3 days. Agent Santos called. It's not Ryan Caldwell. The body belongs to a homeless man named Thomas Kirk, reported missing from Portland 6 weeks before your crash. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Happened before the plane crash. I felt cold. So Ryan killed someone, put the body in a flight suit, crashed the plane with us in it, and jumped out with a parachute. That's our working theory. We're tracking his financial activity. Someone deposited $5 million into an offshore account linked to Ryan 2 days after the insurance paid out. Money was transferred to Mexico, to an account at a bank in Cabo. He's in Cabo. We believe so, but we need to verify before moving. Can't risk tipping him off. For 2 weeks, the FBI worked the case quietly, tracked the money, verified the property, built the case. Then Agent Santos called again. We found him, living in the beach house, under the name Richard Cole. We're coordinating with Mexican authorities for extradition. But I want you to see something first. She sent me a photo. Security camera footage from a bar in Cabo. There was Ryan, alive, healthy, sitting at a bar, drinking beer, laughing, no injuries, no trauma, just living his new life on $5 million, while his wife and kids thought he was dead, while we thought we'd survived a tragic accident, while Thomas Kirk's body was rotting in a grave under Ryan's name. The rage I felt was indescribable. 2 days later, Mexican federal police arrested Ryan at his beach house. They found everything: $5 million in cash hidden in walls, fake passports, detailed plans showing how he'd executed the fraud, the parachute he'd used hidden in a storage unit. Ryan was extradited to the U.S. 2 weeks later, charged with insurance fraud, murder of Thomas Kirk, 4 counts of attempted murder for us passengers, destruction of aircraft. The trial was extensive. 6 weeks of testimony. The prosecution laid out everything. How Ryan had financial problems, how he'd planned the fake death for months, how he'd found Thomas Kirk at a homeless shelter, befriended him, killed him in a remote location, dressed the body in a flight suit, put his wedding ring on the corpse. Then on the day of our flight, Ryan had sabotaged both engines with a timed explosive device, set to detonate at a specific altitude. He'd opened the cockpit door, put on the parachute he'd hidden in the cockpit, put the plane into a descending glide path, and jumped out. The plane continued on autopilot until the engines exploded. Then it crashed. Ryan had landed safely miles away, hiked to a road, had a car waiting, drove to Canada, flew to Mexico from there using a fake passport. He'd even planted the body near the crash site himself, made it look like he'd been ejected on impact. The defense tried to claim Ryan had a mental breakdown, that stress had driven him to this. But the evidence showed careful planning, premeditation, calculation. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 3 months later. Ryan showed no emotion as the judge read the sentence. Life in prison without parole for the murder of Thomas Kirk. Consecutive 20-year sentences for each attempted murder count. An additional 10 years for insurance fraud. Effectively multiple life sentences. As they led him away, his eyes swept the courtroom, found mine. For just a second we locked eyes. I saw nothing there. No remorse, no shame, just cold calculation that had failed. The aftermath was complicated and far-reaching. Amanda Caldwell had to return the insurance money, all $5 million. She'd spent almost $1 million already. Down payment on a house in Colorado. Paid off Ryan's medical debts. Set up college funds for the kids. She lost everything. The house was foreclosed. College funds seized. She went bankrupt within 3 months. The FBI cleared her of any involvement. They'd monitored her communications, tracked her movements, verified she genuinely believed Ryan was dead. She'd grieved authentically, mourned a husband she thought she'd lost. The investigators felt terrible having to tell her the truth, that her husband of 20 years was a murderer, that he'd tried to kill 4 people for money, that he'd abandoned his family, that everything she'd believed about him was a lie. I met with Amanda once, 6 months after Ryan's arrest. She reached out through my lawyer, wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow make sense of it. We met at a coffee shop in Denver. She looked destroyed, aged 10 years and 6 months, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking as she held her cup. I didn't know, she said immediately. I swear to God I didn't know anything. The FBI cleared you, I said. I know, but I still feel responsible. I was married to him. How did I not see what he was capable of? I didn't have an answer to that. How do you recognize evil in someone you love? Someone who comes home every night, kisses you, plays with the kids, acts completely normal. He was good at hiding things, I finally said. The FBI found evidence he'd been planning this for almost a year. He fooled everyone, not just you. My daughter, Amanda said. her voice breaking. She's 15. She found out her father murdered someone, tried to murder 4 more people, faked his own death, all for money. How does she process that? I don't know. I'm sorry. The kids won't even use his last name anymore. They changed it legally. They're Morrison now, my maiden name. They erased him from their identity. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Amanda asked, "Do you hate him?" I thought about it. No, I did at first. But now I just see him as damaged, desperate. Someone who made terrible choices because he thought money could solve his problems. It was for our daughter, Amanda said. The medical bills, leukemia treatment. Insurance wouldn't cover the experimental therapy. It was $300,000. We didn't have it. He was drowning in debt trying to save her. Did the therapy work? Yes. She's in remission now, healthy, because her father murdered someone and tried to kill 4 more people to pay for it. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. A life saved, 5 lives nearly destroyed. 1 life actually taken, all connected by one man's desperation. Amanda left that meeting and I never saw her again. Heard through channels that she eventually remarried, moved to Oregon, started over with a new name. Her kids are in college now, doing well. They've never visited Ryan in prison. As far as they're concerned, he died in that crash. Maybe that's the kindest interpretation. Our company's lawsuit against the leasing company took 2 years to resolve. We sued for negligence, failure to properly vet Ryan, failure to conduct adequate background checks. During discovery, we found shocking negligence. The leasing company had never verified Ryan's financial status, never checked for red flags, never conducted psychological evaluations. They'd verified his pilot's license and certifications, checked his safety record, but nothing deeper. We also found they'd had another incident 3 years earlier. Different pilot, had been arrested for domestic violence while employed. The leasing company hadn't known because they never ran criminal background checks on current employees, only during initial hiring. Our lawyers argued that basic due diligence would have revealed Ryan's financial desperation. The foreclosure notices, the mounting debt, the medical crisis, all public information, all ignored. The leasing company tried to argue that financial problems don't predict violence, that millions of people have debt without becoming murderers, that they couldn't have reasonably foreseen what Ryan would do. But the jury didn't buy it. We won $42 million in damages, split 4 ways. Sarah, Tom, Lisa, and me, $10.5 million each. The leasing company went bankrupt, filed Chapter 11, dissolved completely. Their insurance covered part of the judgment. We ended up receiving about $8 million each after legal fees. The money didn't fix anything, didn't erase the trauma, didn't make Sarah comfortable flying again, didn't stop Tom's nightmares, didn't convince Lisa to return to law. But it did provide security, and it funded the foundation I started, the Cross Aviation Safety Foundation, dedicated to improving pilot screening procedures, to identifying financial stress in aviation professionals, to preventing another Ryan Caldwell. We've worked with the FAA to implement new screening protocols, mandatory financial disclosures for pilots, red flag systems for debt-to-income ratios, psychological evaluations every 2 years instead of 5, confidential counseling programs for pilots in financial distress. It's not perfect, but in 3 years we've helped identify 12 pilots with concerning financial situations, got them into assistance programs, prevented potential disasters. One pilot told me directly, "Your program saved my life. I was thinking about doing something terrible, having someone notice, having help available. It made all the difference. That made the foundation worth it." Sarah Chen's recovery was the hardest to watch. We'd worked together for 8 years before the crash. She was brilliant, sharp financial mind, could see patterns in data nobody else noticed. The crash broke something in her. For the first 2 months, she couldn't be alone. Her husband had to stay home from work. She'd wake up screaming, having flashbacks of the descent, the impact, the smell of fuel. I visited her 3 months after. She was seeing 2 therapists, one for PTSD, one specializing in aviation trauma, taking medication for anxiety. "I can't even look at planes," she told me. "We live near the airport. I have to close all the curtains when I hear them overhead." "It takes time," I said. not knowing what else to say. Does it? Or do some things just break you permanently? I didn't have an answer. 6 months after the crash, Sarah tried to return to work. Made it 2 days. Had a panic attack in the office. Hyperventilating. Couldn't breathe. Ended up in the ER. She resigned the next week. "I'm sorry," she said when she called to tell me. "I know the company needs me, but I can't." Just being in that building, knowing we'd flown out of Boeing Field, seeing the conference room where we'd planned the trip, it's too much. "Don't apologize," I told her. "You survived something terrible. Your health comes first." She took a year off completely. Didn't work. Just focused on therapy, on healing. Eventually, she found a position at a local firm, ground-level office. No travel required. But she's not the same person. The sharpness is gone. She's more cautious. Second guesses herself. The confidence that made her brilliant was shattered at 15,000 feet. Tom Bradford handled it differently. He came back to work after 3 weeks, threw himself into his projects, worked 12-hour days, weekends, barely slept. I pulled him aside 2 months in. "You're going to burn out. I need to stay busy," he said. "If I stop working, I think about it. The crash, the fall, how close we came. I can't do that. You need to process it, though. You can't just ignore what happened. Watch me." But he couldn't sustain it. 4 months after the crash, Tom collapsed at his desk. Exhaustion. Stress. His body shutting down. He spent 3 days in the hospital. That's when he finally started therapy. Started dealing with the trauma instead of avoiding it. The nightmares got worse before they got better. His wife told me he'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced the plane was falling. Sometimes he'd sleepwalk, try to find the exit, try to escape the crash that was long over. It took a year before the nightmares decreased. 2 years before they stopped being frequent. Even now, he still has occasional episodes, usually triggered by something random. A sound, a smell, some detail that connects back to that day. Tom still works at Technova. He's still brilliant, still our chief engineer, but he's changed. More serious, less willing to take risks. Everything has to be triple-checked. Backup plans for the backup plans. Some people might see that as excessive. I see it as wisdom earned through trauma. Lisa Morrison's departure hit hardest because it was most complete. She walked away from law entirely. From a 15-year career. 8 months after the crash, she came to my office. "I'm done," she said. No explanation. "With what?" "All of it. Corporate law, contracts, litigation, fighting over money. None of it matters anymore." "What will you do?" "Teach. High school. Something where I help kids build futures, not move money around. You're one of the best lawyers I know, and I almost died for a business meeting. For $75 million that wouldn't have actually mattered." I couldn't argue. She was right. I'd built Technova into a very successful company, made millions, and it had nearly cost me my life. For what? To be slightly wealthier? To have a larger market share? Lisa saw my expression. "You get it too. You're still here because it's your company. You built it. You can't walk away. But you've changed. I see it. You're not the same aggressive CEO you were before. You're more careful, more thoughtful." The crash changed all of us. It gave us perspective. And my perspective is that I want to spend my remaining years doing something that actually matters. Teaching kids. Helping them learn. That matters more than corporate contracts. She left 2 weeks later. Went back to school to get teaching certification. Now she teaches 11th grade history at a public school in Tacoma. Makes a fraction of what she made as a lawyer. And tells me she's happier than she's ever been. I envy that sometimes. The ability to completely reinvent yourself. To walk away from one life and build another. I couldn't do that. Technova is mine. I built it from nothing. Walking away would feel like letting Ryan win. Like his attempt to destroy me had succeeded even if I survived. So I stayed. But Lisa was right. I changed. I'm not the aggressive, growth-focused CEO I was before. I'm more cautious, more selective about contracts, more concerned about work-life balance. I instituted a new policy at Technova. No required travel. Any employee can refuse a business trip without career consequences. We do everything we can virtually. Video conferences, remote presentations. If someone has to travel, we give them full authority to choose their transportation method. Some people fly. That's fine. I don't judge. But I drive, always. To Montana, to California, to anywhere within 1,000 miles. I've driven to Texas for meetings. 26 hours. I don't care. I won't get on a plane. The sound of jet engines makes my heart. The smell of aviation fuel triggers panic. I've tried exposure therapy, went to an airport with a therapist, watched planes take off, made it 15 minutes before having a full panic attack. My therapist says I may never be comfortable flying again, that some traumas create permanent changes in your brain, that the fight or flight response gets hardwired in ways that can't be easily undone. I've accepted that. Some people might see it as weakness, as letting fear control me. I see it as wisdom, as trusting my body's signals. My brain knows that planes can fall from the sky, that pilots can betray you, that machines can fail, that your life can change in 30 seconds. Why would I voluntarily put myself in that situation again? Trust became complicated after Ryan. I'd built my career on reading people. Ryan shattered that confidence. I'd interviewed him twice, checked credentials, observed him for months, never saw anything wrong, and he'd nearly killed me. I became paranoid, ran background checks on longtime employees, questioned motives everywhere. My therapist helped me recognize this pattern, helped me understand Ryan was an exception. That constant suspicion would poison relationships. I learned to trust again carefully, with verification, with boundaries. Now I do extensive vetting on anyone close to me, because Ryan taught me that due diligence matters, that some people hide who they really are. Some employees probably think I'm paranoid. I'd rather be paranoid and safe than trusting and dead. 3 years after the crash, I started speaking publicly about aviation fraud, aviation safety conferences, insurance events, corporate seminars. The response was overwhelming. People shared similar stories, near misses, suspicious incidents. One executive reopened an investigation into their pilot after hearing my story, found evidence of maintenance fraud. The FAA revoked his license. "You may have prevented a crash," he told me. That became my purpose, preventing the next Ryan Caldwell, helping others recognize warning signs, making the industry safer. My name is Julian Cross. I'm 46 years old. Ryan Caldwell is serving multiple life sentences. He'll die in prison. Thomas Kirk is dead, murdered for his body. Amanda Caldwell lost everything. Sarah, Tom, and Lisa survived, but carry permanent scars. And I kept living, kept fighting to make something positive from something terrible. Because I didn't accept the official story. I questioned, investigated, pushed until the truth emerged. Don't accept easy answers. Don't trust blindly. Don't assume authority figures always act in your best interest. Sometimes they're planning your death while smiling at you. And sometimes the only thing standing between truth and lies is your willingness to ask uncomfortable questions. 3 years after the crash, I started speaking publicly about what happened, not for attention, but to warn others, to explain how sophisticated fraud can be, how someone can plan your death while smiling at you every day. I connected with other survivors of similar situations, people who'd been targeted by elaborate schemes. We formed a network, share information, support each other. One thing I learned is that Ryan wasn't unique. The FBI investigated the leasing company further, found that their background checks were superficial, found 2 other pilots with questionable histories they'd hired, found patterns of negligence. The company was shut down. Licenses revoked, executives faced charges. Some small good came from the horror. 4 years after the crash, I received a letter. From Ryan. From prison. I almost threw it away. But curiosity won. The letter was short. Typed. "Mr. Cross, I am writing to tell you that I am sorry. I know that means nothing. I know you almost died because of me. I was desperate. My daughter needed treatment I couldn't afford. I saw the insurance policy as a solution. I know that doesn't justify anything. I know what I did was evil. I think about it every day in here. About you, about your colleagues, about Thomas Kirk, about my own family. I destroyed everything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Ryan Caldwell." I read it 3 times. Then I burned it. I didn't respond. Didn't acknowledge it. He wanted something from me. Absolution, maybe. Or just acknowledgement. He got neither. 6 months later, I heard through my lawyer that Ryan had died in prison, stabbed by another inmate. Something about a gambling debt. He'd received treatment, but the wounds were too severe. He died 3 days later. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not relief, just emptiness. My name is Julian Cross. I'm 46 years old now. I still run Technova Solutions. We're successful, growing, but I do everything differently. I drive everywhere. I vet people extensively. I trust cautiously. Ryan Caldwell tried to kill me and 3 others for insurance money. He murdered a homeless man, destroyed his own family, spent his remaining years in prison, and died violently. Some people would call that justice. I call it the natural consequence of valuing money over human life. Because in the end, your choices define you, and Ryan's choices led exactly where they had to a lonely death in a prison cell, while the people he tried to kill kept living, kept working, kept building. That's the real victory. Not revenge, not even justice, just survival and the quiet determination to never let someone else's evil stop you from living.